Welcome to the Month in Review briefing. I am meteorologist Michael Murphy, the climate program leader here at the National Weather Service Pendleton office. This briefing will highlight the weather of May 2015. I will provide an overview of the May monthly statistics, a brief synopsis of significant May weather events, and discuss the June 2015 temperature and precipitation outlooks. This graphic is from the High Plains Regional Climate Center and shows the departure from normal temperatures for the month of May 2015. The time period for the normals is 1981-2010. A value of 0 would mean that the location reported the normal average temperature for the month of May. Southern Washington and central to northeast Oregon was mainly above normal, with most locations between 1 to 5 degrees above normal. This resulted in many locations setting daily and monthly temperature records. I will go over some of these records in the coming slides. The next graphic is also from the High Plains Regional Climate Center. This shows the percent of normal precipitation for the Northwest for the month of May 2015. A value of 100% means that the location reported their average monthly total precipitation. Many locations reported above normal precipitation, ranging from 100 to 200% over the forecast area. Several locations saw their top 10 wettest Mays on record. I'll go over these records in detail in the coming slides. The mean synoptic pattern for the month of May 2015 was characterized by a semi-zonal pattern over the Pacific Northwest. There was a strong ridge axis up over eastern Alaska and northwest Canada, with an undercutting trough along the west coast of the United States. This pattern allowed ample moisture transport into our region. The first 10 days of May started off with near to slightly above average temperatures, along with mainly dry weather as a ridge of high pressure remained over the area. Then a pattern shift occurred, with the weather turning cooler and much more unsettled for the middle 10 days or so of the month. This period featured several rain and shower events. The last 10 days of the month saw a continuation of the unsettled pattern, however conditions turned warmer and more humid. This led to more thunderstorm activity, with some storms becoming strong and severe, producing hail, strong winds, and localized flooding. See the significant weather section below for more details on these events. The combination of these weather patterns resulted in a few top 10 May record high minimum temperatures in southern Washington state and central and northeast Oregon, especially during the warm and more humid end of the month period. The following table lists the weather station, May rank of the one-day record warmest minimum temperature, the record temperature with date of occurrence, the current record temperature for the month of May, or the previous record in cases where 2015 is a new record. Hermiston, Oregon saw their warmest May minimum temperature on record of 65 degrees on May 30th. The previous record was 64 degrees set on May 18, 2008. Deva, Oregon saw their warmest May minimum temperature on record of 63 degrees on May 30th. The previous record was 62 degrees set on May 18, 2006. Pendleton, Oregon saw their second warmest May minimum temperature on record of 63 degrees on May 30th. The current record remains 64 degrees on May 31st, 1931. Sisters, Oregon saw their third warmest May minimum temperature on record of 54 degrees on May 31st. The current record remains 57 degrees on May 31st, 1997. Walla Walla, Washington saw their third warmest May minimum temperature on record of 67 degrees on May 30th and May 31st. The current record remains 69 degrees on May 31st, 1986. Ellensburg, Washington saw their fourth warmest May minimum temperature on record of 61 degrees on May 31st. The current record remains 66 degrees on May 18, 2006. Bend, Oregon saw their fourth warmest May minimum temperature on record of 58 degrees on May 30th. The current record remains 64 degrees on May 31st, 1993. Kennewick, Washington saw their fourth warmest May minimum temperature on record of 67 degrees on May 31st. The current record remains 73 degrees on May 29, 1934. Prineville, Oregon saw their fourth warmest May minimum temperature on record of 57 degrees on May 30th. The current record remains 60 degrees on May 24, 1941. Whitman, Mission, Washington saw their fourth warmest May minimum temperature on record of 61 degrees on May 31st. The current record remains 62 degrees on May 31st, 2005. Redmond, Oregon saw their fifth warmest May minimum temperature on record of 56 degrees on May 30th. The current record remains 58 degrees on May 31st, 2009. The mean synoptic pattern for the month of May 2015 was characterized by a semi-zonal pattern over the Pacific Northwest. There was a strong ridge axis up over eastern Alaska and northwest Canada, with an undercutting trough along the west coast of the United States. This pattern allowed ample moisture transport into our region. Numerous locations set top 10 warmest average minimum temperatures in May 2015. Therefore, only stations who had a top 3 warmest average May minimum temperature are listed. Walla Walla, Washington saw their warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 52.9 degrees. The previous record was 52.4 degrees, set in 1994. Ellensburg, Washington saw their warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 48.2 degrees. The previous record was 47.3 degrees, set in 1957. Yakima, Washington saw their warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 49.8 degrees. The previous record was 48.5 degrees, set in 1957. Hermiston, Oregon saw their second warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 48.3 degrees. The current record remains 48.7 degrees, set in 2005. Kennewick, Washington saw their second warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 53.5 degrees. The current record remains 53.7 degrees, set in 1993. Prineville, Oregon saw their second warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 41.8 degrees. The current record remains 42.5 degrees, set in 1897. Pendleton Dam, Oregon saw their second warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 45.0 degrees. The current record remains 47.1 degrees, set in 2005. Clay Elm, Washington saw their third warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 43.9 degrees. The current record remains 44.4 degrees, set in 1993. Heppner, Oregon saw their third warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 47.2 degrees. The current record remains 47.5 degrees, set in 1993. Morrow, Oregon saw their third warmest May average minimum temperature on record of 46.0 degrees. The current record remains 46.2 degrees, set in 1936. Through a combination of the mild start to the month and especially the warming trend for the last 10 days to 2 weeks of May, several locations were able to record top 5 warmest average max temperatures for the month of May. Hermiston, Oregon had its warmest May average high temperature of 78.4 degrees, with the previous record being 78.1 degrees in 2014. Ellensburg, Washington had its second warmest May average high temperature of 76.8 degrees, with the current record being 77.0 in 1958. Meacham, Oregon had its third warmest May average high temperature of 64.4 degrees, with the current record being 66.3 in 1958. Yakima, Washington had its third warmest May average high temperature of 80.1 degrees, with the current record being 81.9 in 1947. Walla Walla, Washington had its fifth warmest May average high temperature of 75.9 degrees, with the current record being 79.2 in 1992. Through a combination of the mild start to the month and especially the warming trend for the last 10 days to 2 weeks of May, several locations were also able to record top 5 warmest average temperatures for the month of May. Hermiston, Oregon saw its warmest May average temperature of 63.3 degrees, beating the previous record of 62.4 degrees set in 2005. Ellensburg, Washington saw its warmest May average temperature on record of 62.5 degrees, beating the previous record of 61.7 set in 1958. Yakima, Washington saw its second warmest May average temperature on record of 64.9 degrees. The current record remains 65.0 degrees set in 1947. Walla Walla saw its second warmest May average temperature on record of 64.4 degrees. The current record remains 65.3 degrees set in 1958. Kennewick, Washington saw its third warmest May average temperature on record of 66.4 degrees. The current record remains 67.5 degrees set in 1958. The Dalles, Oregon saw its fourth warmest May average temperature on record of 64.4 degrees. The current record remains 65.7 degrees set in 1958. Clay Elm, Washington saw its fourth warmest May average temperature on record of 57.5 degrees. The current record remains 60.0 degrees, set in 1947. La Grande, Oregon saw its fifth warmest May average temperature on record of 57.7 degrees. The current record remains 59.5 degrees, set in 1992. Precipitation totals were well above normal in most locations, which led to many top 10 highest precipitation records, and a few locations had their top 10 wettest Mays on record. Listed are the location, rank, May 2015 precipitation, and the highest recorded precipitation for May. Hermiston, Oregon saw its third wettest May on record with 1.35 inches of precipitation reported. The record remains 1.83 inches, set in 2011. Yakima, Washington saw its fourth wettest May on record with 1.80 inches of precipitation reported. The record remains 2.76 inches, set in 1948. Redmond, Oregon saw its fifth wettest May on record with 2.39 inches of precipitation reported. The record remains 4.62 inches, set in 1998. Pendleton, Washington saw its fifth wettest May on record with 2.05 inches of precipitation reported. The record remains 2.90 inches, set in 2010. Richland, Washington saw its sixth wettest May on record with 1.21 inches of precipitation reported. The record remains 2.07 inches, set in 1945. Long Creek, Oregon saw its 10th wettest May on record with 2.86 inches of precipitation reported. The record remains 7.08 inches, set in 1911. Meacham, Oregon saw its 10th wettest May on record with 3.77 inches of precipitation reported. The record remains 6.50 inches, set in 2010. With the abundant rainfall and above monthly top 10 records, many locations also set daily record rainfall totals. Several locations even saw the wettest day on record in May. Listed below are the location, rank, daily precipitation, date of occurrence, the highest recorded daily precipitation, and date for May. Hermiston, Oregon had its highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 0.82 inches falling on May 13th. The previous record was 0.49 inches on May 2nd, 2009. Redmond, Oregon had its highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 1.14 inches falling on May 21st. The previous record was 1.12 inches on May 29th, 1998. Richland, Washington had its highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 0.96 inches falling on May 13th. The previous record was 0.87 inches on May 15, 1994. Yakima, Washington had its second highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 1.05 inches falling on May 21st. The record remains 1.06 inches on May 14, 2011. Kennewick, Washington had its second highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 0.93 inches falling on May 13th. The record remains 1.18 inches on May 16, 1994. La Grande, Oregon had its second highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 1.60 inches falling on May 13th. The record remains 2.30 inches on May 20th, 1991. Pendleton, Oregon had its second highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 1.56 inches falling on May 13th. The record remains 1.57 inches on May 19th, 1991. Whitman, Mission, Washington had its third highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 1.16 inches falling on May 13th. The record remains 1.52 inches on May 31st, 2000. Ellensburg, Washington had its fourth highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 0.86 inches falling on May 13th. The record remains 1.23 inches on May 15, 2011. Pilot Rock, Oregon had its fourth highest daily precipitation on record for the month of May, with 1.10 inches falling on May 13th. The record remains 1.23 inches on May 16, 2005. We now turn our attention to the significant weather in the month of May 2015. A storm system affected the area on May 11th and 12th. A mid and upper level low pressure system rotated through the area from the southeast to northwest, a rather unusual trajectory. There was ample upper level support which created strong lift in the atmosphere. This combined with sufficient moisture and the slow moving nature of the system led to periods of steady rain over parts of the region. The steadiest rainfall generally affected the eastern two-thirds of the forecast area, with locations in north central Oregon missing out on most of the rain. This system left a swath of steady rain over the area, with totals ranging anywhere from half an inch to 1.5 inches or more. The rain generally fell in a 6 to 12 hour period, with the rainfall rate rarely exceeding a quarter inch per hour. Therefore, much of the rain was able to thoroughly soak into the ground, with very little in the way of flooding reported. The only water issues were some minor ponding on roadways and parking lots, mainly in urbanized locations. Overall, the system brought beneficial rain to the area after a dry April. On May 21st to 22nd, another upper-level trough moved inland over the Pacific Northwest. This combined with ample moisture and atmospheric instability to initiate shower and thunderstorm development over the area. There was a very weak steering flow in place over the region, which allowed the storms that did form to move very slowly and produce torrential downpours. These storms began to develop and become more numerous during the afternoon hours on both the 21st and 22nd. On May 21st, a strong, slow-moving thunderstorm developed during the mid-afternoon hours over Redmond, Oregon. This storm produced 1.08 inches of rain at the Redmond airport in about 90 minutes. A flash flood warning was issued for the area during this time, with several reports of flooding occurring within the city of Redmond. Another strong and severe thunderstorm developed several hours later in the Yakima, Washington area. The storm produced small hail, flooding rains, and an estimated wind gust near 70 miles per hour. The Yakima airport reported 1.05 inches of rain in about 1 hour from this storm. Some of the worst flooding conditions were seen in the Selah, Washington area just north of Yakima. Here there were reports of flooding along with water entering garages and homes. A flash flood and severe thunderstorm warning was issued during this storm for the Yakima area. The active weather pattern continued as a large, negatively tilted trough approached the Oregon coast on May 31st. Again, the atmosphere became rather unstable as daytime heating warmed the air closest to the ground. A small disturbance which moved north from northern California was just enough of a trigger to initiate thunderstorms in our area by late afternoon. This setup was quite similar to past events that produced severe thunderstorms here in the interior Pacific Northwest. There was ample atmospheric instability, mid-level dry air, winds changed direction and increased with height in the atmosphere, and the negatively tilted trough provided the initial atmospheric lift over the region. By the early evening hours, a line of thunderstorms had formed over the northern Blue Mountains, which then raced northeast towards the Blue Mountain foothills and Columbia Basin regions of northern Oregon and southern Washington. These storms began to produce frequent cloud-to-ground lightning, small hail, and very gusty winds as they passed through the Heppner and Lexington, Oregon. As these storms continued to accelerate east-northeast, they also picked up momentum coming down elevation off the Blue Mountains. These storms again intensified even further as they passed through Echo and Stanfield, Oregon, with a trained weather spotter reporting blowing dust and wind gusts near 50 miles per hour. The storms mainly passed by just to the south of Hermiston, Oregon, with only thunder and breezy conditions reported here. A severe thunderstorm warning was issued in advance of the storms approaching Pendleton. Frequent cloud-to-ground lightning, small hail, torrential downpours, wind gusts near 70 miles per hour, and blowing dust were observed at the Pendleton airport as the storms passed overhead. The blowing dust reduced visibility to near zero for a short time, creating very hazardous conditions. The storms continued to maintain strength and later affected Milton, Freewater, Oregon, and Walla Walla, Washington, with similar conditions. Damage included roof damage, downed trees, and power lines in the Walla Walla area. And now we turn our attention to the climate forecast for June 2015. The Climate Prediction Center continues the El Nino advisory due to the warmer than normal sea surface temperatures across mainly the central tropical Pacific Ocean. Their forecast states that there's a 90% chance that El Nino conditions will persist through the Northern Hemisphere summer 2015 and an 80% chance it will continue through the end of 2015. The next two slides will provide the outlook for the month of June and what impacts this late season El Nino development may have in our region. This graphic is issued by the Climate Prediction Center, or CPC, and is a temperature outlook for the month of June. The cool colors indicate a greater chance of below normal temperatures, and the warm colors represent a greater chance of above normal temperatures. The time period for normals runs from 1981 to 2010. Most of the inland Pacific Northwest has a 40% chance for above average temperatures, while along and west of the Cascades has a 50% chance for above normal temperatures in the month of June. This graphic is CPC's precipitation outlook for the month of June. The green colors represent a greater chance of above normal precipitation, and the brown colors represent a greater chance of below normal precipitation. Locations along and west of the Cascades from central Oregon northward have a 33% chance to see below normal precipitation, with the highest chances for below normal precipitation along the immediate Pacific coast. Further east, across much of the inland Pacific Northwest, there is an equal chance for above, below, or near normal precipitation amounts in the month of June. Please remember that these are probabilities of averages and that day-to-day weather will still vary for the month of June. This concludes our briefing. Please continue to visit the National Weather Service web pages for the latest weather information, including watches, warnings, and advisories. Thank you for your time.